I think we got a lot of questions about the earnings tax. There are a lot of people who oppose it.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who really don't know in our community about the earnings tax and or really what it stands for. So this was an opportunity to speak on behalf of the people.
One of the questions that caused a little bit of controversy yesterday was, hey, what is the city supposed to do if they don't have that money?
Sure. I think that's a valid question. I think this proposal is a 10-year phase-out plan. So it is an opportunity for the city to come up with a way to fund or to replace the tax. I think there are 75% of other cities that do not have earnings tax. I think we have a lot of elected officials who can look at what the best practices are for other cities and figure out a way that we can replace the tax here in St. Louis.
When do city voters vote on this?
April 5th.
April 5th. So you have between now and April 5th.
That's correct.
The last time this was on the ballot, which was 5 years ago, I want to say like 80% of the voters in the city voted overwhelmingly to continue to tax themselves at 1%.
80% of those who voted. That's correct.
Right. Well, 80% of the people who showed up to vote.
Right.
So 80% of city voters. Why are they going to change after being so successful 5 years ago? Why would they change their vote now?
Well, again, we're talking about 80% of the people who voted, so that doesn't mean that the entire city of St. Louis voted. So there was a small population of people who voted, number one. Number two, I don't think that we've done an effective job of educating our voters in terms of the earnings tax. We've not done an effective job of educating our voters in terms of the abatements and the TIFs that are given. And so this is an opportunity to really educate our voters and let them know what's going on so that they can come out and vote. And I think that's what we're trying to do now.
And it's kind of confusing, too, because if you live here in St. Louis, you pay it. If you live in the county, and then if you work in St. Louis, then you have to pay it. I think that's so many things that a lot of people still don't know about.
And a lot of people don't know about all of the loopholes that many wealthy St. Louis residents are getting around paying the tax. Many corporations are getting around paying the tax. So many people don't know that as well. So I think what we need to do is really educate our voters so that they have an opportunity to vote and that they know what they're voting on.
What are some of the loopholes? What are some of the companies who aren't paying the earnings tax?
There are a number of companies who who work or have their offices in St. Louis City, but they get around paying the earnings tax. So they receive abatements.
The aldermen give them the pass on paying the earnings tax.
Exactly, and there are some wealthy individuals who can afford to pay high-priced lawyers or accountants to help them get around paying the earnings tax. And, you know, the average working St. Louis City resident, the average person making $30,000 a year, they can't afford to pay a high-priced lawyer or an accountant to get around paying the earnings tax. So it's not equally distributed in so many ways. You know, everybody is not paying it, and that is what's unfair. And that's the message that we need to communicate to our voters so that they can, when they're making a decision, they are making an informed decision. And right now, we just don't think that's the case.
How is the legislation written? So 10-year phase out. What does that mean? Explain that.
That basically means that we have 10 years to phase out the earnings tax, so it would be a percentage.
So somebody pays 1% this year, they'd pay 0.9% next year, 0.8% the year after that. That's how it would work?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. And then the city would then do with 1/10 less from everybody next year, and then they would have to then gradually replace that as opposed to doing it away all at once.
Yeah, and I think that's a smart way to do it. I mean, we're not proposing that you cut the city off immediately. I mean, we don't believe that that's fair either. So, but having a 10-year phase-out plan, one, it makes it less difficult to replace all the money at one time. It gives our elected officials an opportunity to really come up with a plan to replace that money. And I say, let's look at abatements. Let's look at the TIFs. I don't know when that's been evaluated. And really, do the people know about the money, the amount of money that's given in abatements and TIFs? So
the earnings tax,
that's an opportunity.
The earnings tax provides 1/3 of the budget of the city of St. Louis.
Yes.
That's a lot of money to make up in 10 years.
You know, and I think, again, when you look at 75% of other cities across the United States that don't have an earnings tax, I think this is an opportunity to look at how we govern and how we fund our city services. And again, if other cities are doing it, I think St. Louis can do it as well. We're not saying this is going to be easy, but we are saying that it's time that we start to look at our antiquated systems and see if there's another way to govern.
Would you recommend a different tax to take the place of the earnings tax?
I don't know that, excuse me, that I would make a recommendation today on how we would do that. I mean, I'm not an elected official. I'm just a St. Louis City resident who feels that we don't need to pay all of these taxes. What I do believe is that we have a lot of wonderful elected officials who can look at best practices across the other cities and see how they're doing it, and see what practices that we can employ in our city.
Stephanie Lewis, spokesman for noetax.com. And the election is, what is it, April
5th.
April 5th, which is almost 1 month from today.
That's right.
Yeah, just after opening day. All right, Stephanie Lewis, spokesman for noetax.com. I guess you're not going to be getting a Christmas card from Mayor Slay anytime soon.
Probably not.
No, all right, good. All right, thanks for coming in.
All right, thank you.
All right, 8:57 here, Big 550 KTRS. Coming up next hour, we're going to check in with Charles Glenn. He's going to continue with the house band. And then we got to talk a little Mitt Romney. We got to talk a little Donald Trump, because Mitt Romney is now, I hope he announces that he's going to run for president.
Well, you know what?